Hello, everybody. You have reached the Tony Moze audio podcast, where in this segment, I interview tech professionals of all levels in marketing, sales, pre- and post-sales on their journeys, hoping to inspire you to make the transition from your previous career and into the tech world. This is the audio version. However, you can also follow me on other outlets, including LinkedIn at Anthony Palmoze, Twitter at Tony Moze, and YouTube, Tony Moze, where I provide you a different angle from my experiences as a former psychology worker and military veteran turned tech professional. Today's guest is Greg Holmes, who is an Area Vice President of Presales for the Europe, Middle East, and Africa District for a company called Aptio, which is a one-stop shop for businesses looking to optimize their IT budgeting, forecasting, and financial analyses. And in this podcast, we talk about Greg's journey into pre-sales, distinguishing the roles between management levels, imposter syndrome, why branding yourself on social media is still important, even as a vice president, how to be successful as a newbie to applying and working in pre-sales roles, and many more. And without further ado, I'd like you to fasten your safety belts and take the ride into the pre-sale side.
The Tony Moze Podcast.
Welcome to the Tony Moze Show, where aspiring pre- and post-professionals come to learn and grow in the pre- and post-sales community. Today, I have Greg Holmes. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Hi, Tony. Thanks for having me. Really glad to be here.
Greg, if you can just, briefly just tell the audience who you are.
Yeah, so I'm Greg. I'm also known as the Sales Engineer Guy, which is a blog I've been running for 15 years around pre-sales. I'm a pre-sales leader for Europe at Aptio, and we focus on IT finance, cloud, and agile, and the spend that organizations have on that. And I've spent over 20 years focusing on pre-sales and pre-sales leadership around the world. Being in Germany, UK, US, Australia, and selling in many countries and companies around the world. So really glad to be here.
Awesome. So if we were to look back years ago from when you were at the University of Sydney studying to get a degree in mathematics and computer science, did you always know you were going to be in pre-sales or solutions engineering? Like, what were your aspirations while being at the university?
Yeah, I'd say while I was at university, I didn't even know that pre-sales existed as an option, right? So, it was, for me, I was doing work as an app developer, working on some internet terminals and things like that, just unique applications and stuff like that. And I was looking at a lot of consulting company jobs as something to do as a graduate kind of thing, like get into the graduate program and do all of that. But, nothing about implementing a big CRM or ERP looked that exciting to me at the time. So when a software company came to me and asked me if I wanted to become a consultant for them, either on pre or post sales, I jumped at the opportunity.
And right after graduation, what was the thing or series of things that made you say, I'm going to jump into pre-sales, doing the pre-sales engineering?
Yeah, so it didn't really exist as a distinct team at the time. So typically, the sales guy, if they wanted a good demo done, they would just go along to the technical team and just see who was available or who did who was the most business savvy, who looked good in a suit, and ask them to come along to a meeting and do a demo, right? And that was basically it. But when I started, I was asked whether I'd like to lean maybe more towards pre or post sales, and I thought about it for about 20 seconds and said pre-sales, please. But over time, I've done roles in both support and implementation as well. So it's all been fine, but I realized I really loved helping at the beginning of that customer engagement the most, right? So understanding their challenges, helping them work out their best way forward, and also working out how do sales teams really work, right? What do they need from pre-sales that is truly unique that they can't get done any other way? And how could I be a great specialist in that area?
So, going from being in the university, one didn't necessarily think, hey, I'm going to be all the way to where I am today. Then there's the next phase of, okay, I'm going to get into it. That's perhaps the present tense of that time. Now, like, what were the things, the series of things that made you say, I'm going to stay in tech, like pretty much prolong, just be in this career, and have staying.
Yeah, I love the customer interaction, right? So that you'd meet different people every day, right? You get different challenges thrown at you, and you had to think on your feet. One of my colleagues at the time was into theater sports and improv, and we'd do these silly games around the office of here's a situation, then talk about it, right? And you just work your way through all sorts of weird situations, and I feel like that kind of thinking on your feet certainly helps make pre-sales an option, right? You don't want to have to look up in a textbook what's the correct answer to this question. You need to be able to think on your feet, make some credible answer, and also be very good at getting back to people with even better answers later on. So for me, it was that adventure. You're going out and doing new things, and you're winning business. So there's a bit of interest on that side to me as well. But ultimately, it was about performing as a part of that sales team.
And you talk about improv. I mean, I'm part of an improv acting group. It's one of those pickup things. I found out about it a year or so ago. And we meet up every Thursday. It's led by someone. I'm not one of those professional people, but it's great just knowing just the nuances of improv. You talk about a characteristic that's like something that it's not something that you necessarily learn in the field of tech. You could learn this outside prior to coming into tech. Improv. I mean, that you brought that up. I think that's so important. I have a belief that people should learn a little bit of improv when going into pre-sales or into a career, because I really feel it's really
sales. Yeah, I think any sales, any presenting kind of work you can do that helps you understand beyond the realm or the domain of your current job, to be able to experiment with the format itself, the way to get that message across, and to be able to take on extra suggestions from people as you go and incorporate them into your discussion. I think all of that is incredibly important so that you actually progress, you collaborate with your customer, your audience, in getting to where they want to go. So I think that's always been really important.
So, I mean, okay, so I'm looking at this right here in regards to improv. There's three levels I have seen, and perhaps you could correct me if I'm wrong, but there's the scripted, demo, or the scripted way of talking to a customer. There's obviously the improv way of talking to a customer. And then there's, of course, the most ideal ways, which is taking both and just crystallizing it where it's fluid and coming out. Now, if we were to take the third one away and just have scripted versus improv, what are your thoughts? Do you think, is one stronger than the other? Should one have a mix of both? How does that look for you?
I think you should always know what you think your core messages are, right? So I think you can script those batches together so you know your core messages, and there might be more than the number that you want to actually deliver in any one session, depending on your complexity. But you should be ready to go out and talk about those core things to anyone. But I do think you need to think on your feet and adapt that message and pick and choose which ones you're taking in, right? You might have, I don't know, if you put them on flashcards or something, you might have 10 flashcards, but you might only choose to bring out 3 of them, right? And halfway through that meeting, you then decide, well, actually, this third one's no good, so you throw that one away as well. But I think it's very important to be prepared with what you can prepare, right? Nothing will sound as good as you making it up on the spot, if you can prepare for it.
So from your ranks of a pre-sales engineer at ManageSoft to principal solutions engineer to a solutions engineering manager at Flexera, what were your lessons, challenges, or growing pains of, this is a 2-part question, transitioning into the management position and transitioning from management into director role. So what were the
Mhm.
growing pains or the challenges or lessons you learned just from simply going from solutions engineer into a management position?
So I think the first thing for me was making sure that I didn't try to take on too much myself, right? Because I think as an individual, you do try and build a lot of expectation on yourself to deliver more and more, right? That's the only way you beat your quotas, you get seen as the best, you're always in demand by the sales team. So you're constantly trying to put pressure on yourself to deliver more and more. I think as a manager, you need to keep asking for more, but then you need to be able to give that work to people quicker than you'd actually, try and do it yourself. And don't get stuck into that trap. I'm too busy to ask for more stuff. Because as a successful manager, you should be trying to maximize whatever your team can do, right? So you become responsible more for the work that the team does rather than just your own work. And you probably want it all to be done to the same high standard that you would have done if you did it individually. But at a certain stage, your team should start overtaking you in their ability to do stuff as well, right? They're the ones actively day to day, working on all of those challenges. So looking after them, making sure that their well-being is taken care of, that there's someone making sure good jobs arrive at their doorsteps, without them having to worry too much about it. I think that's important, right? Looking after your team, their growth, development, and meeting potential. And you have to start to get out of the limelight yourself.
Hmm. And then what about transitioning from the management, the management position into the director role? What challenges or lessons or growing pains, did you learn or face?
Yeah, so you now are responsible for what people are doing, even if you don't have direct regular touch points to them, right? So you've got to create a culture within the whole organization you're responsible for, and make sure that the people that you're looking for taking on that direct manager responsibility for those team members have that same kind of view, right? They want their individuals to succeed. They want to see them grow and influence the way that the pre-sales team is performing. I think also it's very critical then that you're starting to think about how other leaders relate to pre-sales, right? That it's not just you and your team, it's you, your team, and that team's relationship to the other parts of the organization and how you support them. So thinking then about what is your team's ongoing mission. Should your team's mission change, or should you be looking just to improve the way you're delivering on the current mission that they have? And I think that's as you go further up, I think that becomes even more critical. Is that you're minded on that what that ultimate goal of your team is.
Hmm. So I guess, just to hammer that in, I mean, what are some lessons people could learn for their sake when considering an SE management position or being deep into a SE management position?
So I think as you go into that, you need to think about the additional skills that you need in that role rather than just the skills that got you where you were, to that level. A lot of things will put you on the roadmap for being considered as a potential manager, but they're not necessarily the things that you need to be successful, right? You can no longer just measure yourself as the quality of your individual activities, and you don't want anyone ever to say, I think they're a really good person, but their team aren't good enough, kind of thing, right? Because you should be, I think as a manager, you should be measuring your effectiveness as how well do people regard the individual work being done by my team, right? Rather than your own work. So I think that's a key thing that you need to make that switch over for. And you need to be able to give that perspective back to your team as well. Like help them understand how are they perceived, how is the work being seen. Sometimes you get judged on the things you're not doing more than the things that you are doing, and people think, well, why don't pre-sales do this for us, right? You need to work out what are those unmet demands from your team, and how do you work around that expectation.
Awesome. So my girlfriend, she had told me of a family she had worked for. I mean, I've heard this through other times, but this is a more recent thing that she brought up, and I wanted to bring this up again to learn. But she told me of a family she had worked for where the husband was a director of software engineering. It was not really clear, but she told me that when he was getting into a new company, that he did not necessarily need to know the day-to-day functions of a lower member role, rather other responsibilities. What would you say are the subtle differences between vice president versus director versus lower management roles?
Yeah, I'd still feel like you want to have that empathy and understanding of what your team's day-to-day work is like, and maybe even if you're the top VP of the company, you want to some days, if you got the chance, to sit down beside your team and do some of the same tasks that they would be doing, just so that you understand their perspective. Because I really think it is that individual contributor who is the true hero of the organization, right? Your organization won't succeed on the backs just of management, right? It needs those individual contributors who are really doing a lot of the big work, right? Your top salesperson of the year, your top pre-sales of the year, and not just relying on the top one, but finding ways of spreading that work around the organization so everyone is producing, and that you're getting a lot of good value out of the collaboration your team puts together. But for me, the between the different roles, I think each role should have its own autonomy in the delivery, right? So, your lower management, they're very focused about the individual deals that team members are working on and things like that, right? So they've got a chance to add value and help their team, but you also want to give the individuals autonomy in how they're performing work on their tasks too, right? They need to feel like they're empowered to build better demos, to give better presentations. And you just need to give feedback on how is that going, right? Is I really like that demo because you're adding extra value in this way. Maybe share some of these out among the broader team and getting those around. But I think there is a subtle difference there, right? Your VP will never know exactly how we're doing on individual pieces of work, but they will know through how the team is delivering, right? Which things have they been made aware of that are actually adding a lot of value, right? Where could we repeat some really good activities that have been done for customers in a broader sense? So your roles change in terms of the level of understanding that they have about the work that is getting done.
You wrote a blog about imposter syndrome and used a music group called REM. I like the fact that you you used. I mean, I like REM. I love the music from that time, and it was awesome. I'm all about it. Nirvana, Stone Temple Pilots.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm all about it, and I think I'm gonna say not only did I love my '90s rock, I also loved my '90s hip hop too. So
Yeah, me too. I mean, I probably should try and find some other examples I could use for other interesting articles. But
yeah.
imposter syndrome is a really big thing. I think, probably it's not talked enough about in terms of pre-sales, because I think almost everyone in pre-sales probably should feel some imposter syndrome, because you're talking about how people will use your product. And yet, if you're really focused on pre-sales, you're probably not actually getting into many situations where you are understanding how they use the product day to day, right? So your customer is always going to be a huge expert in terms of their problems and their role and what their business is trying to do. And so you need to always carry with you this sense of respect of, my customer, knows this, but they might not know my solution, or they might even not know how to buy a solution like mine for their company. So you need to respectfully help them with your knowledge, your area of expertise, but you should never feel like you're a bigger expert. You're not there just because you're the smartest guy in the room or the biggest expert in a product area. You're there because you've got that focus on helping people buy your solution, right? And I think as long as you come in with a bit of humility, imposter syndrome can actually be a really good thing. But you You just don't want to make sure it cripples you or paralyzes you or gives you a sense that you're not good enough to do something. Because I feel even a total beginner can go and show a valuable level of interaction with their customers by, by listening, by leading the customer to the right answers. They might not know everything, but they know what journey their customer is on. And that could be where they add a lot of value.
Wow. So that just paradigm shift, that having an imposter syndrome could be actually a good thing, could be advantageous if if done right, if finessed right, right?
If you get a self-realization, right, you got to realize, I'm concerned about this situation. I feel really stressed out. These people don't seem to really regard me as an expert. Take a step back and think about it yourself. And maybe, I might not be an expert in how you do things at your business, Mr. Customer, but here is here's the kinds of solutions we offer. Here's how other customers have used them. And I hear, you're talking about this problem that you have. It sounds a lot like how this other customer worked through their problem. And would you like me to help you with that? You know, I think that kind of thing is one. I think another area, people get imposter syndrome dealing with their own organization a lot as well, right? So in pre-sales, you get used to dealing with your customers and you feel quite comfortable almost on that externally focused role. But when it comes back to your own sales kickoff or your sales enablement meeting or just a sales forecast session, some people get really nervous at sitting in the room with their big sales leaders and other people in their organization and reluctant to speak up. And I think they just need to realize they are still the best expert at how we're doing technically with that customer. So when there's a chance to add value on that level, don't be afraid. People want to hear what you've got to say.
Wow. So it sounds like one could also experience imposter syndrome at different levels. There's like different levels to this. Like, I mean, to know that you coming into the field as a newbie, you feel like an imposter. At least I could say that from my story. But then once you're in the field, then you could have the imposter with your clients. Then you could have the imposter syndrome amongst your peers or your colleagues. And that's really interesting to see that perspective. Yeah.
Definitely. I
So
think also if you first get promoted into a new role or you join a new company and you thought you were good enough, but then you're learning a totally new product area or a totally new team, suddenly what you got you where you are isn't necessarily helping you. So you need to think about it. But at the end of the day, they've chosen you for a reason, right? You might still need to grow into that role, but you're good enough to be where you are. So just back yourself a little bit.
it's awesome. So, to paint the picture, you wrote, you wrote a blog about imposter syndrome, and you used, a group REM to paint the picture with the lines like, that's me in the corner, that's me in the spotlight. I mean, so true. Like it didn't hit me until I read the blog. I don't know why. All I knew was that all that I was reminded of was just the melody, the melodic nature of it. Just, it sounded so good. But when you now put it in a blog, now it hits even more, especially in regards to imposter syndrome. Oh no, I've said too much or I haven't said enough. And I had that feeling when I first got into a software boot camp, but it felt even greater when I first got into pre-sales, So when was the first time you encountered imposter syndrome and how did you get over that?
I think that there's just been many times in my career. I imagine that the first time I went to a customer site to give a demo where I was the lead SE on something, I certainly, felt it at the time, and it was really exciting when we won the deal, right? But later on, I moved to Germany, and I was trying to deliver pre-sales to German-speaking companies predominantly, and I did not speak German at the time, so I had imposter syndrome on my language skills. Right, all these other people are making the effort to speak to me in their second language. I'm using my only language to try and speak back to them, and sometimes they were asking better questions than I imagined they might. Right, and then as in my current role, I'm sure when I started, I was confronted with a group of very strong experts in their technology that I was only had a small awareness of. So I had to at the same time, learn this new technology, learn the new jargon that a company speaks about internally, and then also how do they deal with their customers, right? What do those customers expect me to know in my new capacity about our solutions? Because I'm responsible for delivering all of these solutions or selling all of these solutions to these customers, right? So for me, that was another situation. I think as you deal with it step by step, right? Every time in your career you've dealt with being in an odd situation. I think if you take that step back and realize this is just imposter syndrome, right? I have every right to be here and I'm dealing with this problem, to the best of my ability based on the position I'm in. And just, listen to the customer, listen to the challenges you're in and step through them because I think, in most cases you'll have it made.
So, as a vice president of pre-sales, solutions engineering, two-part question: what are your expectations of middle management directors or those who are directly under or reporting to you? And what do you look for in a superior, someone who you report to, such as an executive vice president, CRO, et cetera? So, what are your expectations of middle management, those or directors, those who are directly reporting to you?
So I've got a mixture of individuals and managers beneath me, but my expectation of them is they each have a level of commitment in terms of what are they bringing to the business, right? What are they trying to work on right now? How are they working on it? And, what can they tell me about their challenges? Are there things that they want help with even, right? So I expect people reporting to me to pretty much take responsibility, but give it to me real as well, right? Tell me how it's doing and what kind of challenges they have, and we'll work on it. In terms of the superior level, I think that's where I go to when, to try and, you manage upwards, you're trying to influence the organization, the way that your organization's doing things. So quite often I'm asking for things to help my organization perform, whether it's software and products that help run pre-sales more efficiently, or extra headcount or extra recognition based on the kinds of deals we're working on. I think those are all of the things that I'm looking for. I guess I'm also looking for direction, right? What does that senior management, where it's directly or another senior manager we integrate with or interact with, what do they need from pre-sales? Do they have a view? And what is their overall mission, right? If you know their mission, you can align with them in ways they would not have expected you to be able to do so, right? And when you do that, that's over delivery, right? You're adding more value than ever was expected.
So would you say that you're some not only solutions engineering for the customer, you're also solutions engineering internally?
There's definitely things that solutions engineering should do back internally, right? Because there's huge investment in product, there's huge investment in delivery and support, and pre-sales have unique views on all of those things, right? How could we deliver the value that these customers want better? Is that something we do through the way we go consulting with those customers, or is it something actually that we could build better in the products so that customers don't have to hunt or work as hard to get the value from the technology, right? So I think the feedback you can give to other parts of the organization, and I think it goes back to your previous question about the expectations of those under you as well, right? Is you want to build up not just a top to top peer level relationship. If you're going to have parts of the organization that work closely together, it has to be fully vertical, right? That the individuals in your team feel comfortable giving feedback to individuals in other teams about how you could work closer together and influence across all levels rather than just a top level peer-to-peer relationship.
Wow. So when you were working at one of the first companies out of school, you had a choice to go into pre or post sales, but you chose pre-sales instead because you thought it was exciting. But now as a VP, you have a different vantage point and you have spoken about customer success a few times. So why is customer success or post sales so important to pre-sales?
It's very important in that you need to believe that you're delivering the value that you've promised up front, right? So as pre-sales, I think everyone genuinely wants to be part of an organization that is delivering value to customers. Otherwise it wouldn't exist. And also, it's a long-term relationship thing, right? You're not going to be successful in sales long if you're not delivering what you promise. So I feel like that's a natural inclination of pre-sales to customer success, is that the delivery is doing what you've promised. And that means that the handoff, the first time that you give that handoff to customer success, needs to be very clean and effective. You don't want your colleagues to go in and be asking all of the same questions you've already asked and got the answers for. You want them to be confident about what the customer wants to get out of the technology, out of the tools. And you also want to be understanding that, they don't want to take forever to get to that value. So, and it's also an area that there is, pre-sales have historically done a lot of work with existing customers, right, to make them more successful or to get them to buy new technologies as well. So that long-term relationship is actually quite good still. It's just you want to leverage customer success in a way that they're not dependent on you being there every day. But when you do have time to check back, and you get invited to come back and see how a customer's doing, that you have then the next level of ideas about what can we share with this customer today. What's the next thing on their agenda that we can help them with, that will help them go further.
And you talk about handoff, they say that, right, from pre to
Mm-hmm.
post sales. What makes a good handoff versus a bad handoff? And what would be the consequences of a poor one?
So I think a poor one might mean that the customer wanted thing A, your product does things A and B,
Mm.
and the poor handoff is your implementation team goes and does B, right? So the customer, it's definitely something your product does. It's what one of the things it legitimately does nicely, but it isn't a good match for what the customer was looking for. So it means that they've wasted that implementation effort, essentially, right? And depending on the scale of implementation, that could be disastrous. So you want happy customers. The quicker a customer gets value, the quicker they're likely to buy more from you, right? So that should be a key thing. But also, word of mouth gets around, right? So if your customer gets value quickly, they will be really excited. They'll be telling all of their peers. They'll be telling people, even in their competitors' business, will hear about it, and you'll quickly be able to sell to other companies as well. So a good handoff means that the value is being realized quickly.
Awesome. And how many tech companies would you guess are still having this issue in the year 2021?
I'd say that customer success is still a developing field, right? It's something that, as companies have converted to be more subscription based, more SaaS based, it does become a recurring revenue problem. Eventually your recurring revenue gets to be more than your expectations from new sales, because it just, it keeps adding up, right, year on year. So the longer you can keep customers, successful, the more they keep renewing, they keep buying more products. And so the renewing revenue for your company keeps going up. So the issue, is how successful are they? It's not just are they successful. If they're successful at keeping people for 4 years, then maybe they want to get to 5 or 6. If they're got a churn rate of like 10%, maybe they want to cut that to 5%. Maybe they want to make the number of customers that buy additional products go up. So each of those things is very measurable, but also, the value that your product returns should be a measurable thing to your customers. So trying to get those two things together, I think, is an aim of good customer success.
And so there's a talk about lower members and middle managers in regards to an enablement and mentorship, words like training, enablement, mentorship. The idea that mentorship is mandatory because people are new to their roles, new to the company, new to the industry, or new to management. Does that ever stop? Do VPs still have mentors, and who are yours?
So I feel like I've got mentors both within and external to my business, right? So people that I've either worked with before, or people you mentioned a couple like authors like John Kerr and others, right? There's people that I keep going back to, that if I'm unsure about what my next step is, or how to solve a certain problem in the business, or what's going on with certain challenges in the pre-sales industry, I feel like that is an important relationship to foster. So you want to keep in touch with the people that have helped you get where you are now, but also people whose opinions matter to you, but also people who might help you in a new situation too, right? So sometimes you should be looking out for new mentors and new ideas as well. Just that you know the people that you've gone to in the past might not understand your current challenges in the same regard. So I think looking for new mentors is actually just as important as looking for building that relationship with the existing mentors. And I think it's important at all levels, right? Unless you feel like you've really stopped progressing in your career, you don't want to change what you're doing, and you're happy doing what you're doing, forever. I think that's the situation you might not want to mentor, and then you might still need a mentor to help you stay where you are.
Yeah, I know. To each his own. Not from what I'm finding out. There's some people out there who are fine where they are. And that means not even necessarily getting into management. Some of them are fine with just being maybe an individual contributor, or just just being just not management level. So I mean, again, to each his own, and all that. I was going to say I believe, but I know it was John Kerr, and I now figured it out. John Kerr, his rationale in the book called The Sales Engineer Manager's Handbook, his rationale behind it was, managers are being thrown into the positions without proper or direct guidance or support on how to be an effective manager. What are your thoughts about this?
Yeah, I think, as I said before, it's important to have a mission in any organization. And I think even if you're just the manager of a team, you can build a mission similar to like a brand for that team in what their aim is to achieve. And it could be nuanced by, the products you're responsible for, the geography, or, maybe the part of the sales cycle that you're involved in. That could all be influential in that kind of mission. But I think one is coming up with one, but two, you need to communicate it both to the people you're supporting and to your management and to your organization as a whole. And I think it needs to be bought into from your team, right? If they don't believe in the mission, then you're not going to be very successful. So I think those newly promoted managers, or people thrown into positions without that support, I think they need to, if they reflect on that situation that they're in, that's kind of what they need. They need to agree on what that mission is with their management, make sure that they've got a full understanding of the real aims of their organization today and maybe in the future, right? You might have to do one thing at a time depending on how your organization is constructed.
And idea that came out, I think about this in terms of champion versus buyer. You're in a VP level. I just want to maybe even demystify any ideas. But are you always a buyer since you're a VP now? Or would you find yourself sometimes a champion? Like, what circumstance do you find yourself being in either one or the other? I mean, what would you say yourself you are now?
So I think for my organization, there is situations that there is tools that we want that will be purely for pre-sales benefit, or training or initiatives or a new hire or stuff like that. And I'd consider myself either effectively the buyer or a very strong influencer to the buyer, right? The buyer could still be, my chief revenue officer or my CTO, right? They might be investing in the technology or in an area for us, and I might be a strong champion or an influencer or something like that. If it was something particularly for my team or for my responsibility, then I might be the buyer directly. I've done both, so they're both interesting roles, and I think it's also good to make sure that you've tasted the willingness of the people who will use whatever you're investing in into whether they are interested in it, right? Because you need that kind of buy-in as well, not just from the people who want the business result, but the actual actors using it.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So I noticed that you've created quite a presence. This is what got me to reach out to you initially. from your salesengineeringguy.com, website with blogs and podcasts, to your social media handles on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter, to even having your own show on Clubhouse. In my experiences, it's always the lower member or the C-level individuals being avidly on social media promoting themselves. You wrote a piece on how SE should build their brand. Beyond the average SE, why is it so important for people in your position as VPs to have a digital presence?
I think it's important because it's how people will encounter you first, right? Even if you've got a face-to-face meeting coming up with someone, chances are they'll look you up, right? They will look you up on LinkedIn, they'll look you up on your other social media presences, right? On Twitter and things like that. And what you do and what you say there could be very strongly influential. It could be positively influential, or it could be negatively influential too, right? So I think when it comes to branding, I think you want to look at who is the audience that site is for, right? So LinkedIn, your audience is probably to your customers, to potential employers maybe, or to the industry group that you're appealing to, right? So I think for me, my personal LinkedIn site is very focused on what do I do for the business that I work for, right? But then I've created other social media presences. I've created that blog site because that's really a thing that's out there for the pre-sales community, right? So I have things out there that I think pre-sales people would love to hear about, but not many of them want a mix of my pre-sales content and whatever we do at Aptio, right? There's people in completely different industries who don't care very much for the day-to-days of what I do to earn money for Aptio, but they're very interested in some of the pre-sales content. So that's why I've divided it up, and I think that branding is important in that way. But if you come back to the people I'm meeting next week in respect to what I do day to day, there's elements on my LinkedIn site that are really about, here's our current initiatives around, say, Agile, what we do to show the value of Agile products being developed by an organization. That might help them do their research on the technology ahead of that call, right? So it might actually make my call with them much easier because they know where we're coming from. They've seen some relevant content. They've talked about it themselves. And when we walk in, they respond to elements of what my team are demonstrating. They've seen our case studies. All we really need to do is really explain how it could help them in particular. And we might make a lot more progress in a potential deal, or they might even tell us we don't need what you're trying to sell us today.
Yeah.
And that'd be a reason not to go there and spend several hours of a day or a trip to another customer, right? If they already know, they've already been able to work out whether you apply to them or not.
Wow. So you've spoken before about sales engineering has changed compared, from 20 years ago versus today. You also spoke with Billy Bob Brigman about the future of sales engineering, including one of your talks on Clubhouse. With how the tech industry is only getting bigger and the demands for customers and businesses are becoming greater, do you think that the account executive, management role will become obsolete and the sales engineer will be the account executive or manager for the future? If you look
Wow.
now?
I don't think any of these roles are going away at all, right? I feel like there could be more importance on or changes in importance. And I think the relative scarcity of sales engineers versus account executives could change in the future a lot, right?
Yeah.
But what we look for, I think I look for account executives to be able to explain more about the technology to their customers and be more knowledgeable about the solutions. But I also expect sales engineers to be better on the commercial side too, be more business aware, business focused. But it doesn't mean that either role necessarily goes away. I think the more value they can add, though, is when they can act more autonomously of each other, right? And so you might get away from older fashioned ideas that you need a certain ratio between your pre-sales and your AEs. It might be that you can independently measure the value, the incremental value that an extra AE or an extra pre-sales person might bring the organization and plan accordingly.
Okay. And then as far as the demo, I've spoke to he became a recently promoted VP. He talked about the idea that as far as demos, if they're going to be the canned, default demos that you give to a prospect who's just curious
Mm.
versus like, doing a deeper dive discovery, he believes that the canned demos or, those kinds of demos should just be thrown onto like a frequently asked questions, link on a website, and so that the SEs could do more important things. What are your thoughts about the demo? Do you think like the demo will be obsolete? Do you think, do you think there's going to be some kind of transformation with how we give demos?
Yeah, I think there's many types of demos. So I think getting more information accessible to customers on a self-service kind of basis is a great thing. Customers want to know more and more before they get, deeply into sessions with vendors themselves. So I'd always be supportive of ways to get better information to your customers in a self-service kind of fashion. But I think, they seek to inform the customer, but then the customer will come back and they'll still want to know, how someone else has done it before. They'll want someone to help them see and fit the solution to their needs, right? And, when they've seen half a dozen different vendors doing similar or overlapping functionalities, they'll then struggle to pick between which ones have this capability or that capability or not. And so I think you need that, that solution end. You need to help customers work that out. But I think the value of all of that self-service capability is that it helps customers progress a lot more before they ask for help, and that means your sales cycles could be quicker. You might get quicker into the more in-depth parts of those sales cycles. So, not spending the same time, on call after call every day, giving the same demo, that could have been just a recording, right? I think any time you felt like that could have been a recording, you're probably right.
It reminds me of something that's very similar to that phrase, especially during now with virtual things going on. So that makes sense, though. So you were featured on the CIO office on a thing called Question of IT special, where you talked about your best quote lessons and investments. Were in understanding and caring about people. If you could think of a role model or example from your personal experiences, first off, well, who would these persons be? But how has these experiences, these lessons and investments have served you well in your career?
Yeah, so I definitely can think of a VP I worked with before who was responsible for the pre-sales function at the time. They were extremely caring about the individuals, both on the customer side and in my own organization, right? So they were able to really put themselves in their shoes, think about the problem from that point of view, and come up with really innovative solutions that spoke to more than just a basic understanding of the needs, right? So being able to really look at how someone else will take on a solution and use it and shape it and make it work for more than just an immediate set of goals, I think was really good. But I think that in-depth listening ability is the number one thing, right? I think you need to be able to listen, and then you need to be able to then ask questions, probe, and get more information and give some usable insights back as you go. I think once you're doing that, people will want to spend more time with you.
Mm. The proof is in the pudding podcast. You were on that and you spoke of the hack you use when you're speaking to people on the camera. This is so interesting that you would sit a small Lego figure on top of your camera so you are making proper eye contact with whom you're speaking with on camera. What other hacks do you use in your personal and professional life that we could learn to potentially implement in our lives?
So I think that one's a great example. That's actually from Mark Green, who's another pre-sales leader I've met in the UK. And I think the whole thing comes down to you're trying to connect to people. So don't look at your screen. Don't look at the picture of you talking on the screen. Look at the actual dot of light that is where the camera is and telling you how whether you're actually interacting or not. I think you need to be aware of how people are responding as well. So you can't just stare at the camera, right? Because you need to look at the other person's face and look at how are they interacting. Are they looking bored by what I'm saying? Are they looking excited? So I think always having enough real estate on your screens so that you can see, you can have your notes, and I still maybe think sometimes printing out your own notes is actually still better because you can stick them up on the wall. You're not going to lose a window or something like that. That is what you needed to see to know what what you've got prepared. But as we said before, you've got to be ready to improvise and jump off what you've prepared and use it in the appropriate way and be prepared not to present every single thing that you thought about. But I think you also want to be able to, just deal with the people, right? It's about telling a coherent story, being able to listen and being able to interact with people. And I think once you're doing that, you will generally improve every session you have with people and keep delivering value.
So in your previous and next life, what departments, or industry in tech would you or could you have also seen yourself in?
I love how you ask this question because you get away from me saying, what am I doing next or anything else like that. If what else could I have done? I think, I love all these founder stories that I hear about, right? People who emerge from, their garage while they were studying their masters or whatever, but come up with something far better than finishing their schooling. And I do wonder if I started back at the beginning of my career, could I have invented something like Facebook, or could I have done, something like, SpaceX, some of these, really crazy, great ideas that came out of people's, heads early in their careers, are things that they've based, a whole, multi-billion or trillion-dollar company around. So I think all of those things would have been great. If I think there's never too late to start something like that though as well, right? I think you just need to put yourself into the right phase and stage of your life that is then an option, right? To spend your time thinking about something like that. So I think if I wasn't busy, building up a career around pre-sales, I would have loved to have started at the product kind of innovation end and start from there.
Interesting. Awesome. So my audience is a mixture of three groups of people. I mean, which I feel is all encompassed into me. But it's one people who just graduated from a college or software boot camp. Two, military veterans who are making the transition into the civilian world and looking into tech. And three, civilians who have held professional jobs in non-tech industries but are considering moving into a technical one. For anyone who is an aspiring sales engineer, what are some things that would make them successful candidates?
Yeah, so I would make sure you're learning about pre-sales and what is important, right? But I would say that only 20% of what happens as part of a pre-sales engineer's life is really about the technology, right? Once you've learned enough about the technology of the solution you're offering, I think so much more of it is about the stories you're telling, helping the customer, see the path for them to go from their current problems, and see how someone else has done it and going around and solving those issues using your technology. Yeah, so much of that is based on that story and that storytelling ability rather than just a strong knowledge in technology. And quite often it's the super techies who aren't great pre-sales people because they do over leverage those technical skills, and forget about the human angle, right? So I think they probably, if they're coming from outside of tech, they probably need to learn some tech. They need to think about, how do I get deep enough so that I can explain this technology and what it does for its customers. But they don't need to think that they need to pretend that they've got a computer science or a mathematics degree, right? They are coming from a different angle, and it's that diverse angle which makes them special and makes them interesting to pre-sales leaders like myself, right? So I feel like too many people in a team with exactly the same background means you're not adding depth to a team. You're just adding numbers, right? And as soon as something new comes in, a new kind of challenge, you need that breadth of ability, different people from different backgrounds, because someone will fit that better that way.
So you have a pre-sales talk show on the Clubhouse. What is your personal why to this channel, and what can curious ears benefit from watching this?
Yeah, so we have pre-sales talks. It's run by Pre-sales Collective under, so part of the Pre-sales Collective, we've opened up a Clubhouse club. And the why is it's a new way into pre-sales, right? So a lot of people have come to say that organization or other pre-sales organizations through the industry, but I think the industry also needs a lot of people to come from outside the industry as well, right? So like you mentioned before, people of different backgrounds. And we had a London catch up of the Pre-sales Collective people recently in London. And it was great to see that several people came over to me and we were talking about the Clubhouse group and all of that. They joined Pre-sales Collective from the Clubhouse app. So, if you've got Clubhouse, look up Pre-sales Talks or look up the Pre-sales Collective, and you should find that group and be able to join any of the sessions that we have going. But typically we run it every Friday. For US, it's 12 o'clock Central. I imagine this week it will be busted because we've got a daylight savings change in the UK and not in America. So we'll check that out. But we do different topics every week. Usually we just choose a topic that will help promote a conversation. And I think this week we're talking about pre-sales recruiters.
Cool.
Yeah.
And cool. Talking about, the apps, but, anything that could be on the tool belt of somebody. But what are must-haves and nice-to-haves software for SE professionals of lower to management levels?
So it depends on the solution you're offering, but I love some of the new innovations people are bringing. So people who are using, streaming software to deliver more engaging video content, right? So that you can behave like a YouTube streamer for how you're delivering content. That sort of idea is really good. So something like OBS would help in that area. I think other software, taking better notes or having better recordings of your sessions with customers. And so great technology for the whole sales organization is something like Gong. Gong.io, which does recording. It takes notes. It highlights different calls based on the different kinds of behavior in those calls, and it can help you become a better person at delivering, a customer meeting because it's delivering metrics based on how much are you talking versus the customer. What kinds of questions are being asked, those kinds of things, right? So, looking out for software that helps you do things better. And one thing our organization has just started using is Vivin as a pre-sales tool. So Vivin helps us track our process from a pre-sales point of view. So it's basically helping us use Salesforce better as a pre-sales organization and be able to add value with forecasting, with metrics around delivery of pre-sales effort and things like that. So it helps us, in many ways, but both for the individuals and for the management.
Awesome. And last question, where can people contact you and or where can people find you?
Sure thing, Tony. So find me on the streets of London, but less randomly, you can check out my salesengineerguide.com blog. That's where I post most of my stuff. You'll probably find the PSC Clubhouse group there as well, and the Friday calls and things like that. But also, feel free to look me up on LinkedIn and reach out with questions. I love, meeting new pre-sales people, love meeting new, sales and revenue people as well, right? So I'm not just exclusive to pre-sales, but, look me up on Twitter as well. I think Sales Eng Guy there as well. So, plenty of ways to find me. Maybe I can send you some of those as links.
I have provided information in the description below. If you thought this was valuable, please like, comment, and subscribe to this YouTube channel. And to stay connected with me, you can also find me at LinkedIn by searching for Anthony Palmozzi and Twitter at Tony_Mosey. I want you to envision success to become the best.